Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. It is I, Emily Sophia, here to break down for you guys Season 6, Episode 1 of The Walking Dead. We are breaking down the premiere first time again. So, spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be bearing all in this review, or at least attempting to, because this was quite a jam-packed episode. So I need to apologize preemptively for any ground that I fail to cover, and I will leave it up to you, the content consumers and lovely commenters, to pick up the slack on my behalf. So, at any rate, let's do this thing to the best of our ability. I personally really enjoyed this premiere. I think that perhaps time-wise it could have been a bit more efficient. I don't necessarily know that the 90-minute time span was necessary to convey what they did, but then again, I am such a Scrooge about time, working a full-time job and trying to enjoy and let myself bask and revel in television and then present my thoughts about it to you. So, I'm a bit miserly in that aspect, but as a whole, I am pretty encouraged about the direction that this season could be taking. It is so good to be back with the Mother series, having just finished watching Fear the Walking Dead, and I am reminded once more of just how much I love this show and why I love this show for all of the characters that we've gotten to connect with so far, and all the insanities that we got to experience in this episode, new and old faces and crazy crazy contrived schemes to try to lead a gargantuan horde of walkers down the highway to hell. Like, this stuff is off the chain. And you can certainly argue on one side or the other as to what would be the most logical way to actually successfully defend the Alexandria safe zone. But really nowhere feels like a safe zone anymore. I dare say that no such place exists at this point in time, especially with madmen such as Rick Grimes running the system. And I will say that for as much as I adore his character, and I have no problem with saying that he's one of my favorite characters, he's got some bats flying around loose in the noggin, shall we say. Yeah, he's a man who has come unhinged a time or two, and he has certainly bounced back from some of the severest of traumas, and at the same time we see how his worldview has become deeply and thoroughly skewed. And the fact of the matter is that this is not a man in good mental health by any stretch of the imagination, but he is one who has experienced the spectrum of pain and loss and has come to a place where he understands the need for brutality in this brutal world, because sometimes it's the only way to fight back against it, really. Whereas a lot of the Alexandrians have already grown too soft to become capable warriors in this world. I've been seeing some people talking about the parallels now between Rick Grimes and Shane, of course. And this is something that's been building over time that we've seen emerge in seasons past, this connection between these two pivotal characters. But now, having the character of Morgan back on the scene, we actually see reflected in Morgan a little bit of old Rick. So now it's like there's a completely flipped Rick and Shane dynamic. Does that make sense? I mean, I can definitely see that, because despite the fact that Morgan has finally come to a place where he can face this world, where he has gotten himself out of his barricade in the devastated city, and he has journeyed all this way in order to partner up with Rick and company, but we see too that his worldview is quite a bit different from Rick's now. And the two of them got a little bit of friction. And I think that this could certainly become a point of major tension as time goes on. Now, this show has a giant cast. And fact of the matter is, I'm actually pretty impressed that nobody major died in this episode. Okay, we lost Carter, and the guy playing him got to be the guest star on The Talking Dead, and yada, yada, yada. But I mean, Carter really represents more of an idea than a formed person or character in the show. Really, he represents the idea that maybe, just maybe, Rick doesn't have it all together, and he's not someone who, everybody can immediately throw themselves behind. And I think that that's totally fair and valid, because what he ultimately proposes in order to protect Alexandria is a little bit absurd on some levels. Of course, pretty much any way you swing it, when you're dealing with thousands upon thousands of the undead, well, the fact of the matter is you're going to run into some technical problems. But yeah, Deanna pretty much gives him a lot of control over the way that the town is going to go about holding its own. And ultimately, a little something goes south. A little something goes south when a certain alarm starts blaring in the distance. I'm going to be wagering a guess that might have something to do with the wolves. I don't know anything about them yet. I'm not that far into the comics, and I understand that they are a part of the comics, but I'm not there yet myself. So that's just my guess. I can't see why it would be someone or something in Alexandria making that noise, because it's kind of like counterintuitive to everything that they're attempting to do, and has pretty much turned their lives into yet another living nightmare. So I have no idea. No idea what's going on there. But anyway, so it's interesting to get to see the cuts back and forth between the flashbacks, which pick up at the end of the season 5 premiere, or immediately following, and then leading up into the present, because we kind of see Rick in almost a prophetic kind of role when he encounters Carter with a gun to Eugene's head after Eugene overhears him trying to stir up a coup against Rick. And then what Rick ends up telling Morgan later on is that people like that, they're going to die anyway. Why do I need to kill them? Which is pretty dark. But again, I like this darker edge that Rick's character has taken on. It allows a little bit of Shane to bleed through. And Shane was one of the more interesting parts of the first 2 seasons of the show, for sure. I think that's something that many people kind of hold to. But yeah, and then ultimately Carter dies a silly little death, and I had a hard time feeling bad for him, and in fact felt really nothing. It was just more, his character was there to kind of show that despite the fact that we as an audience are generally like with Rick, and he has been the vehicle and vessel for our emotions since the very start, like we first came to know of this apocalypse through his eyes, it's hard not to feel a kind of kinship with the guy through the television, but he's got some problems. And every once in a while, you need a little somebody in the mix to remind you that, yeah, he does have some problems. He may be the protagonist, but yeah, it doesn't have it all together per se. So not necessarily what qualifies you for the job. But anyway, so it's tough to cover all the ground that this episode covered in this little review, but we get to see a lot of redemptive stuff come in through the works. Even though we see all the issues with Rick and the fact that he's still kind of trying to awkwardly be romantically in Jesse's life after kind of, like, he almost sees himself as one supplanting her abusive ex-husband whom he disposed of and all this stuff. But Jesse makes clear that it's not going to be a cut and dry road for the two of us. So there's Rick. So many things revolving around Rick. But then we also get to see, too, that Glenn has formed a kind of connection with Nick, who he definitely could have killed, and in fact almost did. And there's a lot of these instances of making the choice to back down, which I think is valuable in a world where already so many souls have been lost. And, like, why kill if there is any possible reason that you might not need to? I think that's fair. Yeah, we get to, it was fun to kind of see different humor aspects woven into the show, like when Morgan's trying to figure out who stole his peanut butter granola bar or energy bar or protein bar, I think is what it was, whatever, and just like those little moments of brightness show us why these people have made it for as long as they have. Like they can deal with the devastation and yet find it in themselves to still joke with one another and to endure this madness. Yeah, and just the scale of this episode was truly immense. Makes me excited for visually what kind of stuff we're going to get to take on in the future with the show. I was totally reminded of like the White Walker storm from Game of Thrones, just seeing the sheer volume of walkers in the Valley of Death, you know. So that was pretty crazy. I was impressed and enjoyed getting to see those really powerful visuals, and then Daryl on his motorcycle leading up the motorcade of the dead, and a little almost kind of not suicide mission with Sasha and Abraham, and we see that Sasha's kind of turned an aggressive new leaf, and she seems driven to live on. Father Gabriel is still trying to help, but is not permitted to find himself in the midst of the group's affairs, being that he tried to betray them earlier on. Yeah, but we see a lot of these friendships that have stood the test of time. Another connection that made me really excited to see was not only Morgan getting to meet Judith and become sort of an uncle figure, I like that a lot, but also getting to meet Carol, who has become a very fascinating figure and one of my favorite characters too. It was super awesome to get to see Morgan chatting with her and asking if she was actually a cop because of just the way that she's so aware and ready for anything. And she meets his every comment with a bright and sunny little smile. So Carol, man, she is a woman of fascination. Yeah, again, so many moving pieces to this episode that it's difficult to encapsulate everything. But I kind of liked the cut back and forth between the color of the present and the black and white of the past. Not just because it helps us to differentiate the storylines, but because it really gives us it gives the episode a wide emotional range, and the tone shifts, and there are different kinds of intensities, So yeah, lots of hints at redemption, at coming back from what's been done in the past. But now we see that there is an all-out war that is being waged, and despite how visible and loud and aggressive and incessant as the enemy seems to be, I think that there are other enemies that are hiding, perhaps even in plain sight, and then with the wolves or whatever's going on there, pretty much I think that we're in for some more game-changing action this season, to see a lot of relationships tested and quite possibly to lose some major figures along the way. I think it's about time. We didn't actually lose a ton of major characters in the past season, or at least as many as I would expect. I'm thinking with the size of the cast that we've got now, we're going to have to do a little bit of Game of Thrones style offing of certain people in the mix. But that's not out of any malice in my heart. That's really, I'm just trying to prepare myself for the inevitable. So I hope that you guys can do the same. But yeah, so this was a very grandiose and hectic and diverse little episode. Not so little, 90-ish minutes, or like 75 with the commercials mixed in, but gives me a lot of hope that we're in for a breakneck ride, and that I'm going to find my insanity tested more than ever. So thank you guys so much for watching this review, and anything I forgot, take it up in the comments, and as always, I will be back before you know it.